when helping hands face closed doors. The first time I heard Francina Nalls-Gentry speak about her experiences making space for other people of color in professional settings, something electric moved through the room. There was this collective intake of breath, that moment of recognition when someone finally names the elephant that's been dancing in the corner of your life for years. Francina isn't just a voice on the Pink Parachute Diaries podcast. She's a revolutionary disguised as a mentor, a truth teller masquerading as a business consultant. Her work has transformed how we think about representation and allyship, particularly the uncomfortable spaces where good intentions meet complex human psychology. The hardest part isn't always the external barriers, she said during our interview, her voice carrying the weight of experience. Sometimes it's the resistance from the very people you're trying to lift up. That statement lingered in the air, heavy with truth that rarely gets spoken aloud. And isn't that always the way? The most important truths are often the ones whispered, not shouted. We've all heard about glass ceilings and concrete barriers. We've discussed systemic racism and institutional bias until we're blue in the face. But today, I want to talk about something more nuanced, more personal, and perhaps more painful. What happens when you extend your hand to help someone climb up and they hesitate to take it? Or worse, push it away. This isn't about blame. Heaven knows we don't need more finger pointing in spaces already fragmented by mistrust. It's about understanding a complex dynamic that affects many of us working toward greater representation and equity, especially in spaces where we've historically been excluded. When Francina shared her insights about making space for other people of color, she illuminated something profound about human psychology and the legacy of oppression. The very mechanisms that help us survive in hostile environments can sometimes prevent us from recognizing genuine opportunities for advancement. Think about it. How many times have you questioned someone's motives when they offered help? How often have you thought, what's the catch? We've been conditioned to be suspicious of sudden kindness in professional settings. And with good reason. History has taught us that lesson repeatedly, hasn't it? But this wariness creates a painful paradox for those of us committed to bringing others along. It's like building a bridge while someone keeps removing the planks behind you. Black faculty members at predominantly white institutions know this struggle intimately. They perform what researchers call invisible labor, mentoring students of color, helping them navigate racist encounters, creating safe spaces where none naturally exist. It's exhausting, largely unrecognized work that rarely counts toward tenure or promotion. Dr. Amara Jenkins, a professor at a prestigious university in the Northeast, described it this way. My office became an oasis for students seeking guidance and belonging. But sometimes the very students I was trying to help would resist my advice to speak up or challenge unfair treatment. There's this fear that rocking the boat will sink your chances completely. She recalled a brilliant undergraduate who faced blatant discrimination from another professor. When Dr. Jenkins suggested filing a formal complaint, the student panicked. She told me, I just want to graduate. I don't want to be known as the troublemaker. Dr. Jenkins paused here, her voice heavy. And I understood. I really did. But I also knew nothing would change if we all kept quiet. This isn't weakness. It's a rational response to generations of seeing what happens to those who stand out or speak up. But understanding the psychology doesn't make it any less heartbreaking when you're the one extending your hand. The same dynamic plays out in professional settings beyond academia. Organizations like BLKVC have created networks and educational programming specifically designed to increase Black representation in venture capital, an industry where less than 3% of investment partners are Black. Their programs provide crucial knowledge and connections. But even here, participants sometimes struggle with internalized limitations about what success should look like or whether traditional power structures can truly be reformed. Marcus Washington, a BLCK VC participant, shared his experience. Some peers were hesitant to fully embrace new definitions of leadership or success that didn't match what we'd been taught was professional our whole lives. There's this fear that if we don't play by the established rules, we'll lose what little ground we've gained. He described a workshop where participants were encouraged to build investment theses around communities and markets traditionally overlooked by mainstream VCs. One guy kept saying, "But will white investors take this seriously?" And I wanted to shake him and say, "That's the whole point. We're trying to change what's taken seriously." This resistance isn't just about fear. Sometimes it's about different visions of what progress should look like. Sometimes it's about trust that's been broken too many times before. And sometimes it's about the very real concern that there are limited seats at the table and competition for those seats can pit us against each other. Francina Nalls-Gentry described this phenomenon with remarkable clarity during our interview. She spoke about how making space for others often involves unseen work, mentoring, coaching, emotional support that is rarely acknowledged or rewarded. Yet this invisible labor is essential for creating pathways where none existed before. The hardest part, she said, is continuing to show up even when your efforts aren't recognized, or worse, when they're met with suspicion from the very people you're trying to help. What makes this especially challenging is that the resistance often comes from a place of self-protection. When you've been burned repeatedly, caution becomes second nature. When you've seen token diversity initiatives come and go, skepticism seems wise. When you've watched others rise only to be isolated or undermined, hesitation feels prudent. But here's the painful truth. This protective hesitation can become its own barrier. It can keep us isolated when connection would make us stronger. It can keep us playing small when boldness might break through. It can keep us competing when collaboration would serve us better. So, what do we do with this understanding? How do we honor both the legitimate wariness and the urgent need for collective advancement? First, we acknowledge the complexity. This isn't about right or wrong responses. It's about recognizing that resistance to help often comes from rational places, from history, from experience, from survival instincts honed over generations. Second, we commit to sustained community building. Lasting change requires more than one-time interventions or isolated mentorship. It requires ongoing forums for dialogue, structured engagement that builds trust over time, and spaces where different visions of progress can be articulated and respected. The BLCKE VC model offers valuable lessons here. Their alumni consistently credit the organization with foundational knowledge, growth, and the networking success. But they also emphasize the need for continued dialogue and connection after formal programs end. The work doesn't stop with opening a door. It continues with ensuring people feel truly welcome to walk through it. Third, we recognize that making space for others is not a transaction. It's not about gratitude or immediate results. It's about creating conditions where more of us can thrive, even knowing that the path forward will be neither straight nor simple. As Francina put it, you have to be willing to plant seeds you might not see grow. You have to trust that your efforts matter even when the results aren't immediately visible. This perspective requires a profound shift in how we measure success. It asks us to value process as much as outcome, to celebrate small shifts in culture alongside dramatic breakthroughs, to recognize that change happens in spirals rather than straight lines. It also requires us to be honest about our own motivations. Are we making space because we genuinely want to see others thrive, or are we seeking validation, gratitude, or control? The answer matters because people can sense the difference and they respond accordingly. Perhaps most importantly, this work requires us to hold two truths simultaneously: that systemic change is urgently necessary, and that individual hesitation to embrace that change is completely understandable. Holding this tension isn't easy. It demands patience when we want immediate progress. It demands compassion when we encounter resistance. It demands persistence when results are slow to materialize. But this is the work of true transformation, not just changing policies or demographics, but healing the wounds that make us wary of each other's helping hands. I think about the Black faculty members creating oases in predominantly white institutions, continuing to mentor students despite the lack of institutional recognition. I think about organizations like BLK VC building networks of support in industries that have historically excluded us. I think about countless unnamed individuals who keep making space despite resistance, who keep extending their hands despite hesitation. Their persistence matters. Their invisible labor matters. Their willingness to understand resistance rather than simply condemn it matters. So here's my challenge to you today. Examine your own relationship with helping hands. When have you been the one hesitating to accept the support? When have you been the one offering help that was refused? What might you understand differently about those interactions now? And then take action. If you're in a position to make space for others, do so with patience and without expectation. If you've been hesitant to accept help, consider what might be possible if you took that risk, because ultimately this isn't just about individual success stories. It's about rewriting the narrative of what support looks like in our communities. It's about creating networks of reciprocity that can withstand the weight of history and the uncertainty of change. As Francina Nalls-Gentry reminds us, we don't rise alone, and we don't rise in straight lines. We rise in community, through fits and starts, through resistance and acceptance, through all the messy human emotions that come with transformation. The path forward isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's about extending your hand again and again, understanding why it might be refused and offering it anyway. It's about accepting help when it's offered, even when history tells you to be wary. It's about building new patterns of trust where old patterns of suspicion once reigned. This is how we change the world. Not through grand gestures or perfect solutions, but through the quiet, consistent work of making space, offering help, and building trust. One relationship, one opportunity, one extended hand at a time. The resistance we encounter isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a deeper conversation about what it means to truly rise together. Let's have that conversation. Let's do that work. Let's extend our hands. And sometimes let's be brave enough to take the hands extended to us. Because when we do, we don't just change individual lives, we change what's possible for all of us.